People, I know you are hoarding trash like this at your house. You need some ideas, don't you? I got your back. If you're anything like me, you're like, ooh, Brandy, I don't eat those cookies. But me, I have some people in my house that love these cookies. So I had this tin laying around. Well, I got more than one, but we're only going to DIY this one. And for now, just the lid. And it's a little wonky, but we're going to worry about that later. And for now, we're just going to take some white chalk paint and paint this sucker on up. And people, I do want to let you know that this chalk paint, even though I recommend using this over anything else, it still comes off easily if you don't have time to let this sit and dry, just in case you want to sell this or give something like this as a gift. So it's a good idea to put a layer of clear matte spray paint on here first, or use some Mod Podge before you put your chalk paint on, and then even seal over the piece just to ensure this is going to last. We're turning this lid into a tray, and I was just going to pop some beads on here and call it a day. However, obviously this is wonky, so we have to figure something out to stabilize it. So it took me a second, and I figured if I take this little square and then our little circle base thingy, it was going to work out. So I grabbed my Gorilla Glue gel and decided we're going to use this along with some hot glue. And of course, this is almost out. I like buying the little tubes because whenever I buy the big ones, they just end up drying out quicker than what I can use them. And people, it goes without saying, be careful when you're using this stuff. Ah! Shit. So much fun with that. I got glue on me. If that happens to you, make sure you get it off ASAP, because that stuff will have your skin sticking together and it is just not fun. I added some hot glue to get that immediate hold, and then I popped some more of the same onto our circle piece and attach that to the bottom of our little square here. The square piece really gave me a nice flat sturdy surface, and then our little circle piece gave us that elevation for the tray look. Now it's time to bring in our napkin. We're gonna decoupage this. Are you shocked? You shouldn't be. And if you ever wonder about any napkins that I use in my content, I do sell napkin bundles on my website. Make sure to get those sneaky layers off underneath of your decorative layer. This one was giving me some trouble, people. I'll tell you what, those sneaky layers were really stuck onto this top decorative layer. And whenever you're decoupaging something that has a lip, it can be a little frustrating because you want to get that pattern from side to side. So what I did for this is I just took some water once I pressed this in here to line out around the inside of our circle, and then I just pulled it apart. If you do this very gingerly, it ensures that you get a nice fine line where you have that water. Try not to oversaturate your brush because it will spread more, and then you'll have more of the napkin that you're able to rip. I also decided to take some more of the decorative sections on the napkin and cut them off so I could attach around the lip on the outside of our little tray here. I do not usually cut a napkin whenever I'm going to decoupage it. I feel like tearing blends in much better, but since our lip is super tiny and it's actually pretty straight, cutting it just made the most sense. I'm taking a fan brush and I'm using just a little bit of Mod Podge. Less is always more whenever you're doing a napkin, because too much will create huge bubbles, and it also is super easy to seep through because napkins are pretty porous. And if you're not using a wood or a fabric surface, there's really nowhere for any of the Mod Podge to seep into but the napkin or out the sides. I repeated the same technique for the top of the tray with the napkin, only I did this section by section because I'm using such a light layer of the Mod Podge. It will dry super quick. So you need to make sure that you're either one, moving fast if you're going to put Mod Podge all over the whole entire thing, or you need to make sure that you put enough Mod Podge on there that it's not going to dry in different sections, so you have some pieces of the napkin sealing or not if you choose to Mod Podge the whole thing at one time and it's a fairly large surface. So I like to just do little by little. I used a piece of cling wrap and my dry sponge to apply this. I let this dry for a few hours. I sealed over it and took some silver gilding wax to go around those edges. This turned out super flippin' cute. I am not a Skittles fan, people, so I was super happy to do anything else with this other than leave it as a Skittles container. But we got to get these labels off here, and I'm going to use my heat gun to just kind of heat up the label. It's going to heat that glue up and allow me to peel this off. And we're just going to turn this piece into a little container that we can store some stuff into. Going to paint this sucker up, and we're going to decoupage it. I know, we're decoupaging another piece. Listen, I thought this was a great idea. Plus, this is a tiny portion of a huge decoupage paper print that is going to be released on my website soon as part of the TDS product line. More details on that to come in a couple of weeks. I'm going to take some of this Dixie Belle paint because I am obviously almost out of it. Spritz a little bit of water in here and then add some of this calcium carbonate to give it a little bit of a texture. Now this stuff is really great to add to acrylic paint to create a chalk paint, but if you add some of it to some chalk paint, it gives you a nice little gritty texture to add to your pieces. I find it's easiest to use a pouncer, a little sponge to apply to glass or plastic, you know, but make sure that your pouncer or whatever is not on the half because this sucker apparently was not glued in properly at the manufacturer, so it made my life a pain. And my battery, because I used Ryobi heat gun, was not charged, so that was fun. Lucky for me, the side we're going to decoupage, I just was able to paint with a paintbrush because we want that to be nice and smooth. The texture also, that's a preference, so if you don't want to do a texture, you know you don't have to. I just personally wanted the rest of this little container to have a texture. And I also decided to have a texture around the top, but I went over the top of the lid with a white, so this way there was a little bit of contrast here and not the same gray all over the entire piece. I did layer the container with 2 coats and no, it didn't get any better, and I should have just gave up and got something else, but I didn't. I'm holding the piece like I'm decrepit to keep the little sponge attached to. Oh my gosh, and as you can see, I am trying to heat up my gun, the glue gun in the background. Like, that's gonna save me at this point. I even went and got a different look at me with the paintbrush. I was so frustrated. I'm like, tap, 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 tappity, tap, tap. I was so done with that sponge. Meanwhile, I was basically done painting by the time that heat gun was ready to fix my sponge. I glued this little knob on top of our plastic lid. Make sure you use some E6000 or Gorilla Glue gel for that. And then I moved on to our decoupage aspect of this DIY. This decoupage paper is tissue paper, so it's thin, but not as thin as a napkin, and it's definitely not as thick as paper. So I wouldn't recommend using a lot of Mod Podge whenever you go to apply this one to anything. Just a thin layer is good. And I just used some cling wrap and my dry sponge to apply this. It was super easy to apply. Again, it's thin, so I wouldn't use anything like a piece of plastic or whatever to try and apply this. It will probably tear a hole right through this stuff. And just like when I apply a napkin, I decided to do little sections, and this worked out really well for this. And of course, I finished this up by going around the edges of the piece to make sure that it was completely attached to the little container. We didn't have any gaps. And then I sealed it up with one final layer of Mod Podge after this dried a couple hours. People, today I am teaming up with my good friend Angela Jones DIY to bring you some true trash to treasure DIYs. If you guys get a chance after watching these DIYs, stop on over her channel and check out her projects, see what she has for you. The link is down in the description box. To grab your attention in the thumbnail, it says you're not going to believe number 3, and I mean that. See this porch? It's sad. It's missing something. It's missing a little side table, and I'm going to use this Lipton container here to create us one. However, brought it in the house and I'm looking at it, I'm like, something ain't right. This is just going to be the smallest table ever. And I thought, let's grab another container. Lucky for me, we have this laying around because we like lemonade and we like tea. We're from Baltimore, you know, half and half. It just goes together, okay? Can't get rid of them roots. I was a little sad that the wrapping around the lemonade container would not come off. Now, I needed to get a top, so I ventured to Dollar Tree. I knew in their plus section that they had these amazing wood rounds for just $3. And we're gonna need some rocks, so I stopped over their little jar filler section, that's what I like to call this, and grabbed some that I thought would match the rocks I had at the house and the color of the siding. I picked up 2 pieces for this project, one for the top, one for the bottom. This way, once I put the rocks in the container, it's going to be pretty level and I'm not going to have to worry about this going anywhere. I removed the tags and I removed the hooks. Of course, I'm saving the hooks for later because you never know what you might need those suckers for. Now, you can do whatever you want to the top and bottom of your pieces, but I am going to create some stain art using some grays, some teals, and some of Waverly's antique wax. First, we gotta create the custom stains, and I'm gonna mix our grays together with just a little bit of water until I'm happy with that. And if you're wondering what water ratio, I usually use about 1/4 cup whenever I'm doing something small. That's usually enough water to create the blend, and it lasts pretty long on fairly big projects. You can use a sponge. I do like using sponges, but since I had so many colors, I decided to do this in 2 different layers with the paintbrushes first to get that dark layer in the background. And then as I was going along, I had a sponge that I was coming in on the sides to blend in the antique wax and our stain paint that we created together, so this way you didn't just have straight lines. I had to wait for this to completely dry with the first layer, and here you can see how dominant the lines are. There's not a lot of blending going on, and there's nothing wrong with this look. I create this look as well. I just wanted something blended for this particular piece. In total, this project took me 3 days, and the blending and the stain with the top and the bottom took me several hours, but I did accomplish those pieces in 1 day. As this was drying, I noticed the gray was still really light, so I put a little bit on the side of the bowl so I could kind of just touch that and add a little bit of water and then create a little bit of a deeper colored dimension where the gray is in the top of the table. I didn't worry about it so much in the bottom because for the most part the bottom is going to be covered up and I wasn't trying to add any more work onto me. To attach our canister to the bottom piece, I wanted to put some screws in here, so we're going to need to bring in the drill and attach a little drill bit that is slightly smaller than the screws that we're going to use, and I'm just popping 2 in here. You can pop as many as you want, but I plan on, and be careful, okay, be careful. Make sure you got your PPE on because this is like metal. It's, you know, it's metal. And then I placed the canister on, you know, the center-ish of our bottom piece and drilled holes through the bottom as well. So this way I could easily put the screws up through the bottom and attach to the canister. On the canisters themselves, I wanted to create a stone effect. So I'm going to use some joint compound to help me accomplish that, along with those Dollar Tree rocks we picked up. Make sure you're in a well-ventilated area and you're wearing your PPE whenever you're exposing yourself to this stuff for a long period of time. I just went out on my front porch. There isn't a ton of footage of this because I had struggles trying to film it for y'all. But as you can see here, I just smeared the joint compound everywhere and then I smooshed the rocks where I wanted them to go. I did leave a little gap where I plan on attaching the 2 of these canisters, and when I was happy with that, I let these dry for a full 24 hours. I feel like these turned out so beautifully, and for the most part they were stuck in there really well. I had a couple little stragglers that kind of popped out, but I feel like that was just me not putting enough joint compound in certain sections. So I'm going to use these screws to attach up through our piece, and in my mind I was like, we're gonna put this down because we need something for it to grab onto inside of our little can here. And yes, I put some hot glue and some wood glue onto this little shim inside of there. I really feel like if you're going to do something like this, you need to have something else for the screws to grab onto on the other side. Unfortunately, the hole was so narrow for me to hold my hand in, and I didn't want to accidentally drill my fingers, so I just prayed that they caught onto the little shim, and unfortunately they didn't. The shim popped right out. Oh, it popped out. Great. I added more glue to the nails inside of the can and then took to my rock garden to find some rocks to put inside of the canister. And of course, in my mind, I'm like, we're going to grab the biggest rock we can find. Of course, it doesn't fit. After I rub 2 brain cells together, I grab a few handfuls of larger rocks and start putting them down in here. Now, the wind in my area is horrendous and everything ends up in my neighbor's yard. So I am praying that as time goes on that this thing can withstand the weather we have here. I used some tacky glue and I used some painter's tape to attach this, and a little bit of hot glue, you know, for that immediate hold. And once I had this wrapped up nice and tight, I felt like we needed something else. So I brought in the stapler and started stapling all around the center of this. I wanted to ensure that not only the weight was going to keep this in place, but as well as the hold that I attached in the center. When I was happy with that, I smeared some more of the joint compound everywhere and then smooshed some more of the rocks right on in here. Now, it goes without saying, you cannot just put something like this outside, people, and pray it's gonna last. You gotta take a trip to the store and make sure that the sealer you're putting on here is gonna do the job. This is the stuff that I decided to go with. I have used this before, not this exact brand, but the oil base before, the interior one, and I love the end result of it. And just a little tip, whenever you're using this kind of stuff, make sure you're outside preferably instead of just a well ventilated area. This stuff has a really strong smell, but it's super durable. Try to spray in little sections because it will clump and yellow if it, like, you know, pulls up together. But people, once this stuff dried, it's absolutely gorgeous. The table, I could not be happier with it. For this cookie tin, it just screamed, turn me into a wall planter. And I was like, I got you. We're going to use some chalk paint though, and we're going to make you a little colorful with this, okay? So I got to work and I put 3 coats of this paint on here. And I found this leftover, you know, decorative metal, I guess you would call it, laying around from who knows what project. And I thought, we're going to cut this up so this way we can create our little lip for our planter, so we can stuff some stuff in the little pocket, you know what I mean? So I took a pencil and I just traced it on along until I thought it was gonna fit in there, and I figured we could just trim up whatever extra edges. So we're gonna need to bring in our wire or metal cutting shears. Okay, metal cutting shears. I picked these up from Hobby Lobby, and then just follow along the dotted line. Now I do want to, you know, tell you to be safe and wear some gloves. Honestly, don't be a rebel like me. This stuff is sharp and it hurts, and it just probably will work much better if you wear gloves, but I don't, you know, I live on the edge and you guys rolling with me. So that's what we're doing here. And look how cute this turned out, right? It turned out really nice. Now there's a little lip on these things that you can gingerly tuck something in there. So I was like, instead of gluing it to the outside, we're just going to glue it on the inside of this lip here. And I'm like, we're going to just use hot glue. And that was a really bad idea. I need to know who is using hot glue on metal and pretending like it works like a charm. Who's doing it? Because I've been trying to glue this for 10 minutes now. And it will not stick on here. Like, it's not happening. So I found basically an empty bottle of E6000 and I squeezed it as much as I could to get the teeniest, tiniest little drops out of there to attach that metal piece right onto our cookie tin And then I took some of this Dollar Tree nautical rope, measured it to size, and used tacky glue and hot glue to create our little hanger. As always, people, thank y'all so much for hanging out with me today, and until next time.